Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. And you're probably thinking out loud, going, wait a second, where's Stephen Travers? Where's Take 5 with Travers? What's going on? Because Vincent Turner is with us here, our co-founder and host, along with Patrick Steenberge. Patrick's going to join us in just a second. But what you would normally expect from our Thursday show is Patrick, myself, Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, but it's going to be a little bit different today. Patrick, God bless his heart, he's helping a baseball team. They're doing some fundraising. He couldn't be in both places at the same time. So we asked Vincent to be here. Vincent, thank you for filling in for Stephen. Obviously, he's not able to make it here today, but we got a great guest, and we're going to have an absolutely wonderful conversation.
Yes, sir. I'm very blessed to be here today, filling in for Mr. Travers, the USC great. But I'm really excited about our guest today because I want to ask him about that 71 season, which is a special college football season. And then I want to ask him about his hometown, Erie, Pennsylvania. Fred Belifikoff.
Yeah.
Back to you, Hawk.
We will get that taken care of. But first, let's introduce our guest, Patrick Steenberge. You are the president, the CEO, the founder, all the things that are really important with global football. And what I love about what you're doing, Patrick, is you took your passion for the game and turned it into a worldwide passion that as a business and as a growing community of people, it's amazing. But you're joining us here today from just north of Dallas. Thank you, Patrick, for being on the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Glad we got to talk a couple weeks ago and you invited me to be here today. And it's always fun to tell stories and learn from other guys.
Well, let's get right to the storytelling, because when I've read your book, and right here, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. You also included a letter. I got a postcard. I've got stamps. I've got baseball, football cards. I got a coin to flip there at halftime of any game that I want to do. The full package. But before we get that, one of the interesting things that I noted about your book is that you begin in the foreword talking about in your life, especially early on, there were sports and athletics, but more importantly for you, the number one thing was traveling and adventure. That's a different take for most people. It's usually the other way around. Sports. And then I had an interest in mathematics and I became a doctorate scholar and physicist. Not for you. Your passion for traveling and moving from one place to another, it's very exceptional. And I love that part about you. Talk a little bit about that being what, from your very early age, was that something that you grew up in the Steenberge family with, your brothers, other family members? Tell me a little bit about that.
Wow. Actually, my dad kind of inspired me to that. He was an accountant for the General Electric Company. And in Erie, Pennsylvania, where they built locomotives and shipped them around the world. And he would go to these far off places, generally like third world countries, South Africa, Brazil, where they were shipping locomotives to help build their economies and build their transportation. And he would come back with these really cool smelling pieces of leather, or some. And I can remember at a young age, he brings these little cool little things back for us. And I got an interest there. And then at age 24, I was living in Fort Collins, Colorado, and my parents had moved to Brazil where my dad was working then. And my brothers and sisters all went down and visited on their own for 2 weeks. And I called them one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to come visit." They said, "Great. When are you going to get here?" I went, "I don't know. I'm going to start hitchhiking on I-25 outside of Denver." And I did that on January 2nd, 1975. And I had my backpack and a sign that said Rio. And a guy picked me up in his pickup truck and it's snowing out. I'd been there for like 4 hours going, this might've been a bad idea. It's really cold January 2nd. And he said, "Hey, where are you heading? Which Rio you going to?" Thinking like Rio Chalma, Rio Grande, whatever. I said, "De Janeiro, of course." And he said, "Get your butt in the car." And we started that adventure. So yeah, I enjoy travel. To me, there's no better way to learn than when you're traveling, whether you're in, South Dakota or New York or Georgia or in, Brazil or Tanzania or Ireland. So yeah, that's become a big part of my life.
I would figure with Dad being an accountant, it would be his his daily journey went from the front door to the parking lot of General Electric to his office, and then reverse that each and every day. But he had the thrill of being able to go in person and seeing some of these places, the final destinations, for obvious reasons, making sure the gauge of the track, making sure that the specifications of the locomotives met what they were needing. And did you ever get to go on any of the trips with him? Were you old enough to be able to accomplish that? Or did he just plant the seeds by leaving little bits of leather and some other pieces of knickknacks that he would bring home and give you that invitation to want to get out yourself?
No, I didn't. We didn't get to do that. There were 6 of us, and Mom had to just figure out how to get us all out in our snowsuits and then get us back in when we got too cold 10 minutes later after we were out playing snow football.
Yep.
So,
okay.
Yeah, didn't get
or hockey or whatever it was, right? The
Yeah.
Steenberge family, 6 brothers, sisters. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, there were 4 boys, 2 girls. I'm number 2 in the list, and yeah, we were blessed with parents who cared for us and worked hard and took care of us. Went to a Catholic grade school, all boys Catholic high school. And, I look back on it very fondly. I've lived in Texas now for 37 years, and prior to that in Arizona. And I still have a sister who lives back in Erie. And, I'll get back every couple of years and they'll say, "Why do you live in Texas?" And I went, I'm an adult and I have a choice.
Yeah.
Erie is a great place to grow up. And summer, whether it came on a weekend or a weekday, was always, it didn't last quite long enough for me. So
sure,
it's a great town. In fact, I'm going back this next week. I'm going to fly into Pittsburgh, see a buddy of mine, and then go up to Erie for a couple of days.
Well, you mentioned your brothers, obviously getting to wrestle around the house or in the backyard with them. But Pittsburgh, if that's where you would land to get back home, boy, that area has always been a farmer's delight in terms of recruiting and finding kids that love football and are skilled at it. They learn how to play it right at that level. Did that happen for you?
Yeah, it was really competitive football, in the grade schools, in the Catholic grade school system, they had their own parochial league. I think there were 8 or 10, St. Luke's, St. George's, St. John's, and we all played against each other, and
yeah.
In 4th grade, my big brother was in 7th grade and I was in 4th grade. He was going to football practice. I said, "I'm going too." And the coach said, you're not big enough. I went, "Well, just put me somewhere where I can play," So yeah, it was competitive. It was really good football. And, as you get older, you look back at things in life that happened to you that had, at the time it was like, okay, whatever, and then you look back 50, 60, 70 years later and go, wow, that had a big effect. And I remember our high school, Erie Cathedral Prep, which was a pretty good powerhouse. We had 1,200 all boys. In fact, I just talked an hour ago with Mike McCoy, first round draft pick with the Packers, played 14 years in the league. One of the biggest men, for the first 300-pound athlete I ever saw.
Yep.
And
yep.
he was 3 years ahead of me at Erie Prep. Kind of helped influence me to go to name. But I just talked to him an hour ago. He's in Monterrey, Mexico. He speaks with a lot of schools these days. He's got his own kind of mission work. And I helped him get into some schools down in Mexico where I've got friends. So it was fun to talk to him about days. But yeah, it was and we had a school, with 1,200 boys, we could run the football, right? I mean, we were running kind of just wing T, straight T kind of stuff in 1967, 68. And then our coach left after my junior year, and he went down into Pittsburgh into a much bigger market, got a job at a bigger school down there. And they gave the job to our offensive line coach, a guy named Tony Zambrowski, who had played for Frank Leahy back in the 50s. And Tony, I had started for 2 years just because I knew the play and I could give it to the right running back, not because I was a great thrower or anything. And he took over and I went, oh my gosh, I don't know if we're ever going to get to pass the ball, and I was thinking I'd go to Edinburgh State maybe, or, one of the schools in Western PA. But I had a dream of Notre Dame, being a Catholic kid, and Notre Dame had won, had that 1966 10-10 tie against Michigan State, which those of us of our age understand that. But he called me into his office right after Christmas and he said, "Sit down, meathead. That's what he called me. So I sat down and he slides a book across the desk. And that moment changed my life because it was Tiger Ellison's Run and Shoot Football.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what's this all about? He goes, we're going to have some fun. We're going to throw the ball. We don't have a great running backs, but we've got one fullback who can run. We got some guys I think can catch the ball. You can throw it. So which gave me then, we're throwing the ball 30, 40 times a game, which gave me the stats to then get seen and recruited by Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, all the schools in that area. And think about, changed my life. Otherwise, who knows where it would have gone, but it was, a great place to grow up, great place to go to school. So yeah, life's pretty darn good.
Patrick, you mentioned something there that really captured my attention. I will always give credit to the high school coach for having the most difficult task of putting a lineup together, because you can go from a big, enormous team when you were a sophomore. I imagine that's when Mike was a senior. You mentioned Mike McCoy, right? One of the biggest human beings you've ever seen in your life. You can do things a little differently when you got big guys up front, but when you don't, you have to change. And I think that's why the spread offense has caught on like wildfire at the high school age, because there's never a shortage of smaller guys. They can run, but you got the big guys are hard to come by. The smaller guys, you got rabbits all over the place. And for him to be able to do that with you, Coach Steenberge, to be able to do that, and you have the fortitude to go, yeah, let's make this happen. You desired that.
Oh yeah, I wanted to throw the ball. I wanted to have more activities. And one of the more fascinating guys I met, a big rival, our big public school was McDowell, which was kind of just outside of the town of Erie.
Yeah.
And they were known for just being a really tough, school. And they had a coach that was known for being really tough. He was actually friends with my coach, Tony Zambrowski. And that man has gotten pretty famous because there's the NCAA award now for the best offensive line. Those 5 guys they give the award to. That was Joe Moore. Was the head coach at McDowell High School. His idea of mixing it up on offense was to run off of left tackle instead of 26 straight times over right tackle.
Yep.
And a guy named Jeff Davis was on their team. He ended up going to Ohio State as but I got to know Coach Moore pretty well when I was in college a little bit. And just he went on to be Lou Holtz's offensive line coach when they won the national championship in '88.
Wow.
And now they give that award, the Joe Moore offensive line.
Yeah, best college line. I would imagine his ability to steal from the Lombardi era of 27G, not 26G the whole time. Let's run 27G, and we're going to run to the weak side, and we'll see what happens with this guy named Paul Hornung and all that. Who are your idols growing up? Who are the guys that threw the ball that you go, man, I'd rather be like him than be the guy that hands off?
Well, being a Notre Dame fan, it was Terry Hanratty, who was in the quarterback for the '66 national championship team. In fact, I remember Time Magazine was the big magazine in everybody's living room back then. And it was a news magazine primarily, but they had sports and stuff. And after the Purdue game, as I recall, in 1966, and it was Hanratty to Jim Seymour, and they were on the front cover of the Time Magazine, not Sports Illustrated, but Time Magazine.
Yeah.
And it was because all of a sudden Notre Dame had a winning team again, which they had not had for 7 or 8 years. So he was kind of my hero growing up. And I still talk to Rat as we know him. I got to meet him later on, and really good guy. Oh, and he had a great career. He ended up playing in Pittsburgh, was a part of the Steeler organization. Hey, is that what that is? Yeah. Yep.
His connection with Joe Gilliam and Bradshaw, of course, and Hanratty had a little bit thicker mustache than what was normal for that day. He probably didn't get to enjoy that while he was on campus at Notre Dame, right?
No. That was not allowed.
Well, I know Vincent has a bunch of questions in regards to your high school. The next thing I want to know is let's get into when did the reality come in? When did you start getting letters? You mentioned Penn State, Ohio State. When did Notre Dame first get in touch with you? And what was that like for you as a young kid to know, wow, I may have a chance to go. And this would be, as a young Catholic kid to be able to go to Notre Dame. That's a dream come true, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And my sophomore year, between my sophomore and junior year, there was an ad however advertising happened back then, but there was a little notice that my coach told me about, and it was claimed the first quarterback wide receiver camp in Tidioute, Pennsylvania, run by head coach new to Penn State, Joe Paterno.
Oh, wow.
And him and Dan Radakovich, Bad Rad, who was his offensive line coach, but they ran a camp down in there, and I was at the time, I'm 6 foot 3/4 inch. I probably was by the time I was 16. I'm still the same height, but I was kind of skinny but I could run a little bit and learn how to throw a little bit. So my junior year, I started, getting letters and stuff. And Notre Dame had an alumnus, it's kind of like, how did they recruit back then, right? I mean, there's no way to get all that information. And I think a lot of them relied on alumni or coaches who had, played there or gone there. And there's a guy named John McCormick, who was a big Notre Dame alum, owned a construction company in Erie. And I think he got word to Notre Dame about me. And Tom Pagna was the quarterback's coach who recruited me. So, my junior year, but I didn't do any visits until my senior year after football season. So during basketball season. So I would play in the high school basketball game on Friday night. And then my dad would drive me to Columbus to go meet Woody or to State College, or eventually to Notre Dame. And, while I was interested, you could visit 5 schools, I think was the deal back then.
Okay.
And I was interested in all of them. But when I went to Notre Dame, Mike McCoy showed me around. He hosted me. There were no girls on campus back then. It was still an all-boys school, although there were some from St. Mary's that I'd heard about.
You had to go across the lake to go. You had to get. Did you have to paddle with Mike in a little rowboat?
There was a little road you could walk across. There was a lot of negotiating. Where are we going to meet? Are we going on your side or mine? And I did. So anyway, it was when Era, I can remember Era offering me, my grant and aid, as they called it, and I was like, yeah. So I'm going. So it wasn't a hard decision once I got to that point.
What was it like meeting him, sitting in the office? And was there wood paneling back in the days in the late 60s, early 70s? How long had he been there, by the way? Was he at least a decade, right? Or pretty?
No, he came in 64 was his first year.
Okay.
And
so he'd only been there for a couple of years. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
He'd been there 5 years. And that was John Hewart was his quarterback, who he brought up out of the ashes to make him the starting quarterback. But yeah, he'd been there, 5-6 years or so. And, he was pretty calm, very businesslike, that was always his demeanor, but very direct. It wasn't like Woody Hayes, who was jumping up and down and bringing down his books about Rummel and the Air Force in North Africa. And just like, whoa. But Era was just very matter of fact. He was, I remember it was a Sunday morning before you left, and he had his coat and tie on, and his white shirt. And he just sat there and basically offered you a grant and aid. So it was, that was a pretty special moment to do that.
His pants were a little flooded. You could always see the white socks and the black spot-built shoes, right? That's a trademark right for all the coaches back then.
You're right. I've still got a pair of spot builts, I think.
Did you wear those on game day? Please
tell
me. Now, did you have a pair of Joe Willie Namath white shoes in your high school wardrobe at all?
No. That was we're a button-down team.
Okay. All right.
Vincent probably wore
those, questions right? I know as well. I mean, I've got thousands of them, but Vincent, please, I've taken too much of the interview.
No problem. I love the conversation. It was back in the time when I was growing up. Mr. Patrick, I can't believe that the man from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, wasn't your hero back then and went down to the University of Alabama, Mr. Joe Namath, coming out of your area. But I'm going to talk about where you're from, Erie, Pennsylvania. And obviously, a great area. It's something in the water, obviously, because y'all have one of the greatest receivers that played for Raider Nation, Fred Biletnikoff. But 2 other young men did pretty good in the National Football League. The young man out of the University of Iowa, Bob Sanders, who got a Super Bowl ring with the Indianapolis Colts. And then me being a Cowboys fan, I know that you set the tone for Mark Sandusky, the man out of Pitt that won 2 Super Bowl rings with the Dallas Cowboys. But most of all, when you first got on the Notre Dame campus as a young freshman, your first day, did you not think, hey man, I'm gonna touch down Jesus? The Four Horsemen, Alan Page, Jack Snow, Rocky Bly, Alan Page, Jim Lynch, Art Hunter, Frank Leahy. What was your thinking then as an 18-year-old freshman the first day on campus? I know you had to be like a kid in the cookie jar, picking that favorite cookie out.
Without a doubt. Yeah, I was. When I got to visit there, it was exciting. And then when I, got to go there as a freshman, yeah, it was a thrill. And all those names you ring off, there were, and I've gotten to know some of them very well. Like, in fact, I'm going to see Rocky when I go to Pittsburgh. Rock's become a great friend, and his story is just incredible. What he's done in his life. But yeah, I felt, just very blessed to be there. But the odd part is, in Pennsylvania, I think they still have, it was called the Big 33 High School All-Star Game. Mm-hmm. And it was like the top Pennsylvania players against Texas for many years. They've also had some Ohio, but that year it was an East-West game. And so I was picked on the West team along with a guy who ended up being a pretty good quarterback at Penn State, John Huffnagel.
Yes.
Played in the league. He was the other guy, and John Hogan, who was a starter at Pitt. So the three of us were on the west side of the Pennsylvania team. Late in the game, I took a hit, and I kind of tore up my knee a little bit. It wasn't terrible. It was like a cartilage. But back then, if you had a cartilage tear, they'd put you in a full-length cast, right? and say, don't move for 6 weeks, which was the worst thing you could do. So anyways, I showed up at Notre Dame in a cast. So my freshman year, I really couldn't do anything in the fall except walk around. And here's the story. They told me there were 3 quarterbacks they were recruiting among the 47 scholarships they gave freshmen that year at Notre Dame. Wow. And there was one guy from Pittsburgh and one from Arizona. And I go out there the first day, and I'm in crutches, And back then, freshmen weren't eligible. So you were the scout team. You were the prep team all the time, which might have been good because I didn't get hit that freshman year. I just kind of watched it. But Mike Stock was our freshman coach. So we got the freshman team over on one field. We got the varsity on the other team. Era's up on top on the tower where he could watch offense and defense on either sides. And they start warming up. The quarterbacks are warming up. There were 17 scholarship quarterbacks.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
I said, wait, you told me there were 3. And, a lot of schools, you just take your best athlete and put him at quarterback. And then, there were like 5 or 6 who moved that day. He said, Denny Gutowski, you're a running back. Daryl Dewan, you're a great running quarterback. You are now a halfback, and Ken Schlesis, you can throw the ball okay, but you're a really good defensive back. So they moved a bunch of those. But there was one guy who threw the ball that first day 95 yards. Ooh. And I'm like, oh, my God. If you could throw it 60, 65, that's the most you're ever going to need. But I saw him throw it 90 yards. And Stock sent a manager over to get Era. I brought him down off the tower, came over and said, hey, let me see you guys throw the ball. And there's still like 15 guys throwing it. And I'm in my crutches standing around watching. And this guy aired it out again, 90, 95 yards. He was 6'5". His name was Jim Bulger, whose son had a pretty darn good career, Mark Bulger.
Yes,
that was his son.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was able to, to move ahead of Jim on the depth chart the next year. And, but yeah, it was an exciting time just to be part of that,
Hey, Patrick, real quick, explain for those that weren't a part of that era. Was it, I just go to class every day and then practice? I mean, the ineligibility, you had 4 years to play 3 back in those days. And, did that affect your classwork? In your scheduling, like your sophomore year, you want to play. You're going to take different classes. You're going to make sure that you move around practice so that you can practice first and then school later. But that first year, you got to sit out. What was that like for you?
It seemed right. Calculus was tough at Notre Dame. Every freshman had to take calculus.
Oh boy!
And a lot of guys didn't make it. But the good thing, having gone with the good sisters and priests at Erie Cathedral Prep, is everybody had to take calculus your senior year if you were in a college track, which everybody was.
Yeah.
So I had already taken calculus. I'd struggled with it, but I was pretty good in math. So my freshman year, I open it up. It's the same book that I had my senior year. So I actually would earn little $5 bills from my buddies, helping them with their calculus at night.
Wow.
But it was just they made your schedule so you were done by like 2:00, and then practice. You'd have to show up at 3 and practice, late afternoons, even. So it's what it was. You went to school and you practiced, and you'd have a meeting after practice. As when we would have after dinners, when we'd have our team meetings. We didn't do what they do. I know a lot of teams now practice in the mornings, build their schedules, but we had to carry, they gave you 15 credit hours your freshman year. And I always carried 15 to 18 hours, every semester, because you were there to get an education. There was no question about that. And there were guys that missed games and missed periods if they were failing in classes.
Wow. Well, you're one of the first NIL recipients. I'm glad those $5 bills kept going your way.
Yeah, it's about the same thing now, right?
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah. But the pizza money at the end of the week, then you could go across the lake and
exactly.
take one of the St. Mary's girls out for a movie and a bite to eat and a milkshake, right?
I think once or twice I did, yeah.
Maybe, yeah. We're not keeping track of that. All right. Well, then your knee finally gets better. What was your rehab situation like that? Did Notre Dame accept the fact that, hey, you're coming in hurt, we're going to get you ready? And thank goodness you didn't have to throw 93 yards to qualify to play the position, but you started on the field and showing what you could do.
Yeah. In that springtime, you're right into it. You had winter workouts, which was basically agility drills in a gymnasium. One day a week, you'd run the stadium steps, which in South Bend in January is not much fun.
Nope.
It was usually ice and snow, but you had to run all the steps. It was 60 rows. Now it's higher than 60 rows. They built it higher. I'm glad 60 was enough when you had to run every one. And we'd play basketball. That year they brought in the weight training was kind of silly. They brought in what was called a universal gym. I don't even remember those, Vincent, right? You had little places around a bench, and some traps and cables and stuff.
Leg press. There's always a leg press.
Leg press, which is what I did a lot with because of my knee.
Right.
And the athletic trainer, who looked like he had never lifted a weight in his life except, a lot of 12-ounce cans. And he said, "Hey guys, we got a new weight system here. Quarterbacks, we don't want you to bulk up too much, so just do the light weights." And that was like the weight training schedule. Yeah. There were some of the linemen who had dumbbells, barbells, off to the side, but we did that, and then got ready for spring practice, and things worked out pretty well. By the end of spring, we had a spring game, and I was running. Joe Theismann was the starting quarterback, and he was going to start. He'd had a great year the year before, and so he was running the number 1 offense. And there were like 2 or 3 of us running the number 2 offense. A guy named Bill Etter, who was a year ahead of us, Jim Bulger, and myself basically were running the second offense. And had a good spring, good spring game, and came back in the fall as the number 2 guy playing behind Joe T. But back then, when you'd get up 2 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns on the field, they'd put the backup quarterback in. I mean, they wanted you to get some reps. So I played in 9 of the 10 games that year. The only one I didn't play in was that silly night out there in California where it rained like crazy and the White Horse got mud all over us running back and forth. They beat us out there.
Well, that's a fight-on moment. What was your big asset that you had to where you moved up to number 2? You said just the previous year there were 17 quarterbacks. Was it your understanding of the playbook? Did you just throw to the right guy at the right time? I mean, what was your asset? What was the reason that you were able to be that number 2 guy?
I wasn't fast enough to play at running back, and I wasn't tough enough to play at defensive back. So I guess they just left me there. I think I could remember the plays. I could run pretty well. We were running triple option a little bit then. We were doing basic ride the fullback, read the guy, read that defensive end. I was able to do that, and I could throw the ball pretty accurately, and make good decisions. I think it's kind of just as much mental as anything. And Era was way ahead of his time in a lot of things. We would call a lot of series in the huddle. He'd call belly series right on 2. That's all you do in the huddle. And the belly series right meant, okay, the tight end lines up right on the right side. And it's the belly series. So the backs knew where they were lining up. And then at the line of scrimmage, you would read the defense. You'd basically count, where the lineman is, count the linebackers, and you would go, your first call would be 2, 4, 6, 8 or go. With 2 is like you're going to hand it to the fullback. 4 is you're going to ride him and pitch it. 6, you're going to ride, pitch, option. Go is you're going to ride it, go back and pass. I mean, we had all of that stuff happening at the line of scrimmage within, 10 seconds. So I was able to kind of comprehend and make the right decisions. I think that was probably the key why I got there.
So you're good in calculus and you're able to figure out what you're going to do and make the right call. And I'm sure the coaches at one point or another going, this Steenberge kid, we can't get rid of him. We want to move him to another position, but he's next to Thiesman. He's the next guy out there. We gotta dress him, and he's traveling with us.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And also Bill Etter, who was a year ahead of me, was really a good runner, good passer, and he was right there. But he got injured, I don't know, early in the season or so he was off the depth chart also. So yeah, things broke pretty well for me.
Well, I know they spray paint a little bit of real gold in with the helmets. What was it like the first time you heard the fight song after you go through the tunnel?
Oh boy, I don't know. I was, you're so excited just to be there, and I wasn't one of those calm, mellow Joe Montana type quarterbacks. I was pretty fiery, it's just the way I live. It's the way I was raised. So I'm sure I was excited. It was just a great moment.
Absolutely. I just think, you're a part of this, and it's been, for decades, even back in the mid to late 60s, decades previously, Notre Dame football and the legacy that it's had and the relevance in terms of, we may not win the national championship, but we're going to be pretty dang close. Just about every stinking year you've had in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and you get to be a part of that. So your first time out there, did you put your hand up on Play Like a Champion today and then walk through the rest of it?
Contrary to folklore, no, that did not exist. That was a Lou Holtz thing.
Really? Okay.
It did not exist before that. So you learned something there.
Era didn't need a sign to tell you to play like a champion. He just made you do it regardless, right?
And his message every year, the first day back, August 18th, would be very simple. We have one goal and only one goal. Undefeated, national champions. See you in the morning. That was our message the first day.
It.
Very simple. Undefeated national. When guys ask me now, what's the difference now then? I went, well, we were like average athletes compared to what they are now. And the mission was to win every game, which I think they still have that mission, but you can lose one or two and still get to the national championship. Back then you weren't going to do that. So
yeah. Well, tell me now, you're a sophomore and here you got Mike McCoy again, just like in high school. He's there. Who are other big guys that you, not just big people, but some of the big names and personalities that eventually went on that were a part of that they were seniors or guys that were about to play in the pros. They just were a year or two away.
Well, our defense was outstanding. And we had a really good wide receiver named Tom Gatewood, who was an All-American guy. And Tommy, just an outstanding, receiver. And they'd get him the ball and he could run around guys and run over guys. Dan Novikov, offensive center, was really good at that position. John Dampier. And then on defense was where we were really strong. In fact, a great trivia question. Who was the last Notre Dame player to be the number one pick in the NFL draft?
Walt Panowski.
Walt Patulski. You got it, Vincent.
Yes, sir.
From Syracuse, New York.
Yes, sir.
I was going to say the Polish guy that I can't remember his name.
That Polish guy, Walt Patulski, who was really frustrating because if you're running second team offense, you're going against Walt a lot of times on defense.
Yep.
And he was so long that he could come down on a little option play. He could reach out, to slap you as the quarterback, and he could also step to the pitch man at the same time, But we had him, and we had Greg Marks, who was a defensive tackle who played in the league. Mike Kadish, Clarence Ellis, who was a top draft pick for the Falcons. Clarence Ellis was a really good DB. So we had really good defensive players, a lot of solid offensive guys. And we ended up going to the Cotton Bowl that year to play against Texas. We'd actually gone my freshman year and Texas beat us. That's when they had Jim Bertelson and James Street, and they were in the midst of their run, and they had won 33 straight games, I believe, when we played them my sophomore year.
Wow.
And I said they had beat us my freshman year. I got in for a series that freshman year because Joe went down on for a play. And, you're on the sideline, you're at the Cotton Bowl, it's sunny and nice. And that's why I said, I might move here someday. We've been practicing in sunshine for a week instead of snow.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're there, you're ready to play, but still, all of a sudden Joe doesn't get up on a play. It's like Steenberge went, oh, wow. And I ran out onto the field, and, we actually kept a drive alive and went down and kicked a field goal there. We beat them 24-11. In the Cotton Bowl. So I got to see some action there. Joe came back and played the rest of the game. It was outstanding. So that was the end of that year, and looking forward to the next,
Well, did you prefer the whites or the blue your first year there? The jersey combination. You always had the gold pants, white socks, black shoes.
Yeah, it didn't matter. I think we liked being at home in blue,
Yeah. But tell me now, is it that one gigantic, about 300-mile long cloud that went from mid-October all the way through till about February? Is that same one cloud that you experienced until you got to Dallas and got to enjoy a couple of days in the sunshine?
No, it would blow through. It didn't just hang. It was like continuous clouds.
Right. One after another for 5 months.
Yeah, with a little wind thrown in just to make sure. I didn't know how to throw a dry ball.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. Vincent, now you want to go in now. Your junior year is when you start playing, right? Joe is gone, and it's time for you to take over.
Yeah, there was a big, who's going to be the quarterback, and we had all pros coming back all over on the defense. Nobody knew who was going to start, and Bill Etter had come back from his injury, so it was basically he and I, and then there was a sophomore coming up, kid named Cliff Brown out of Harrisburg, and we were ranked preseason number 1 by Sports Illustrated. Went up to Northwestern to Ross-Age Stadium and beat them pretty handily. That's where Era had been the coach before he came to Notre Dame. Alex Agassi, I remember, was the coach there. And basically, I started. Etter played a lot of the second quarter, second half. We both split time, but I probably got 75% of the snaps. We won, and then we went down to Purdue. And we were going to open up the offense a little bit because they had a massive defensive tackle named Dave Butts, who had a great NFL. You remember him, huh?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, he could play. And Leroy Kelly was a running back. They had a really good team, and but we went down, and at 4 a.m. I remember waking up in the hotel there just off campus to sheets of rain and lightning and thunder, and it started pouring rain, and it did that all day, night. They wouldn't play the game today if just because it was lightning crackling, throughout the game. It's like, that's all right, no problem. We'll run the ball.
It's just one bolt at a time. Don't worry about it.
It's no big deal. No big deal. So anyway, it was a battle. They scored right before half, went up 7-0. Every time we'd get a drive going, somebody would slip or fall down, or it was a mud mess. And the thing went on. We had it with about, 6 minutes left to go. We finally put a drive together. We get down, move the ball, get down to like the 2-yard line, and I'm going to turn and hand it to the fullback. Somehow the ball between the center, Dan and I, who were good friends, he claims to this day it was my fault. I claim, I don't know. And but anyway, we fumble. They recover on like the 3-yard line. That was the longest jog of my life, was from that point to Era's eyes. And I felt terrible. The ball's, you don't know what happens at that moment. All I know is the ball's out and they got the ball. And defense held them. We had Walt Patulski, Fred Swenson. Defense held them. 4th down, they go to punt the ball. And from deep in their end zone, the guy bobbles it a second. We hit the punter. Ball comes out. We recover. So it's 7-6 with like a minute left in the game. Back then, you didn't have overtime, right? So our only chance to win the national championship is to go undefeated. So we had put a 2-point play in throughout, which Era always had in, during our week's preparations. And he just said, go get 2. And went in and was able to find Mike Creaney in the back of the end zone. my roommate one year, and they'd run a little thing where he would go to a knee, fake a block, go to his knee, get up and slip out. And we managed to fool everybody. I faked the ball to Bill Gallagher on a little tear sweep. And Bill to this day says the only reason it worked is because the whole defense went after him. They were frightened of him. And so anyway, we turned around and lobbed an ugly pass, but it got in his arms and we win 8-7. So
Wow.
it was one of those memorable days. Yeah.
The walk back to era was a little bit better after you get the 2-point conversion.
Oh my, we're just like, I've got a picture somewhere and my jersey had been ripped half off. I've got a great photo somewhere of the jersey ripped and I'm just like, yeah, we got him, so yeah, it was an exciting moment. So yeah, the bus ride back was much better.
Absolutely. Vincent.
Mr. Patrick, those one of the plays I was looking up my research on you last night. You was a hero that day. You talk about y'all, the 71 season, let me start off, was very special because you had so many competitive teams that year and so many great players. And I got to give you a lot of respect to be a starter on the number one team. And then you looking at all those players of them other teams that was playing that year. Oklahoma with Jack Mildred and Greg Pruitt. My man in Nebraska, Rich Glover, Jerry Taggart, my man, the speed demon, Johnny Rogers. Then Alabama coming up with Johnny Musso and John Mitchell. Then Penn State had them two studs, Laddell Mitchell and Franco Harris. Then Colorado in the mix with my man, the speed burner, Cliff Branch. Then Michigan with Reggie McKenzie. Michigan State with Brad Van Pelt. Man, Georgia was even, I think, ended up number 7 when the polls all said it done. Andy Johnson. Then all the great players. 71 had to be one of the greatest college seasons ever. Lawrence McCutcheon at Colorado State with my man right there, Hopper LaBelle. Tommy Casanova at LSU. Ed Marinaro, the Hill Street Blues, Cornell. Robin Newhouse at Houston. Riley Odoms at Houston. Stanford even had a good team. The linebacker, Jeff Simon. Tennessee with Bobby Majors. Man, it was some smoke. And then in a little school like Toledo had Chuck Early, who was breaking records. 71 was special, man. And I got to take my hats off to you to be involved with that, to be the starting quarterback with the number one team in the country. The day at 100 yards football got to make you special. Put respect on your name. Talk about that right there.
That's quite a list, Vincent. That's awesome hearing those names because, I remember them vividly, right? We scouted a lot of them. I knew of them. I read about them. I heard, some amazing stories. Tommy Casanova made us look real bad down in the Tiger Pit that night. He was pretty darn good. And they had a quarterback who was a fair guy,
Burt Jones.
Yeah, Burt Jones. He could throw a little bit.
And that is cousin Andy Hamilton, who was All-American.
Yeah, he could run some routes. That's awesome. That's, I mentioned real quick, and Mike Creaney, my roommate, who's just an amazing student of the game. We were back last year for the SC game at Notre Dame, and we were on the sideline pregame, and I said, hey, do you think these guys, do we like have anything? Do they even look at us and realize we played? He goes, maybe, but we're small, And he goes, think of it this way. He goes, the years between now and when we played in 1971, say, is longer than between us and Newt Rockne. from 1970 to 1924 when Rockne's coaching the first. So it's like we're kind of irrelevant to today, but the history and the names and what those guys did was, and I don't think about it often, but sometimes I guess it was pretty blessed times,
But
go ahead, Vincent.
But I got to stop you there, Mr. Patrick, because there's not a lot of people walking around right now that could not say the respect that you have. Notre Dame, world-class education, a strong sense of community, independence. Y'all signed that contract with NBC, not sharing no money. The academics at another level. And you got 11 national championships. You part of that. Sorry, Hop, back to you.
No, all good, Patrick. I'm thinking all those schools at Vincent, that'd be great over a 4, 5, 6 year period of time. You played all of them in the same year? There's no way.
That's wild. Yeah, they were They were all
Who's the athletic director that scheduled that, for crying out loud? You go through that,
we didn't
and
play
you better be national champions, or
Yeah,
you don't even have to play in a bowl game. You're it.
We didn't play all of them, but we played our common opponents. And there was a great man named Moose Krause. Edward Moose Krause was the AD, and our SID was Roger Valdesari, probably the dean of SIDs, whose secretary assistant ended up being Joe Theismann's first wife. And the summer after his freshman year, it was her idea, I believe, to change his name from Theismann to Theismann.
Theismann, yeah.
To rhyme with the Heisman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Roger was just Roger, and he just passed away a couple of years ago. Just an amazing guy. But yeah, I think it was pretty special times, and like I say, I look back and I wasn't an incredible athlete. I could just do a number of things, fairly well, and was able to get some playing time,
Well, you end up getting hurt. Talk a little bit about the injury, and then what happens in your life?
Oh boy. That summer before my junior year, I was in the best shape I could ever be. I'm just like, during the days I was working construction for that John McCormick, asphalt paving construction. So I got used to the heat and all that stuff.
Did you stay in South Bend, or did you go back to Erie?
No, everybody went home. Pretty much everybody, unless you needed summer school for your academics. That was basically the only guys that stayed. So I went back to Erie, worked out. But I had a really good friend, Don Aleksevich, A to Z, who got an award at the end of the season for being the top player in what they called small college football. He was at Hobart College up in New York State. Not far from where Ed Marinero was playing that same year too. He's part of that same year when you mentioned that, Vincent, and he won the Heisman at Cornell. But Donnie and I would work out every evening together. He'd run patterns and I'd throw balls, and he'd run and I'd throw, and he'd run and I'd throw, and I'd chase him, and then we'd sprint. The last week right before we're going back on August 18th to camp, we're running sprints, and he was always a tenth of a second faster than me, maybe 2/10. But this one day I'm running really fast. I'm feeling good. I'm 6'1", 195, and I'm chasing. I'm just about ready to catch him. And I felt like somebody stabbed me with a knife in the back of my hamstring right up by my butt. And basically I tore the hamstring. That evening I looked and it was just all purple inside, you could see it. So I ended up 2 weeks later showing up at camp with a torn hamstring. I had to tell the trainer I wasn't, but they didn't have anything, there's no way to heal a hamstring in 2 weeks. Nope. So we did ice, and Darvon number 3, I think it was called, was the pain, the qualified pain pill you could take. So I basically played, the first couple games with that hamstring being torn. But again, I didn't have to be the guy. I just had to get the ball to the right guys, And in that Purdue game, I kind of retore it because I slipped in the mud, And when we came back the next week, we were getting ready for Michigan State, and Era had put me down to second string and put Cliff Brown at first string. And actually, I'm sorry, he put Bill Etter at first string, and Cliff and I were running too. And I was, I don't know, angry. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. I understood why from an injury standpoint, but I was still out there practicing. I could do what I wanted to do. The next week, we went down to Miami to play, and Bill Etter tore up his knee. That was that new old AstroTurf stuff.
Yep.
It's just
horrible, just rotten. Yeah,
you can tear your just walking. You can tear your knee. But Bill went out, and then I went up right in the middle of the game. Coach Pagna, the offensive coordinator, goes, "Steenberge, come on, you're up." And I come run up, and all of a sudden, Era turns around. Cliff, no, I want Brown. And they had not talked about it, I guess. And he put Cliff in. And then the next week we played USC at Notre Dame, and they beat us. And kind of the season. And then we won the rest of the games, lost to LSU that night with Tommy Casanova and Burt Jones, the end of the season. I played on and off, but not in a starting role. So I was angry. I was disappointed. The team voted not to go to the Gator Bowl. They let us vote on it. It was just a tough season because we had such high hopes across the board, and we ended up going 8-2 and voted not to go to a bowl game. because
Wow.
we'd like, hey, we're going to the top or we're not going. I think back at that, and it's like came back in the winter and worked out hard again, and in the spring, and basically won the job back in the springtime. I said, I'm better than that guy, and I just committed to it. Came back in the fall, ready to go. We didn't have a lot of the guys had left. Patulski had left, Gatewood had left, but there were still a bunch of other guys, really good guys. Daryl Dewan, as I mentioned, John Siskowski as a fullback. Greg Marks was still there. We had some really good players. And first, we used to go back then. I don't know what you did, Vincent. The NCAA rules, you had to go 3 days of no pads. And then you could put pads on and, start hitting people. And, those first 3 days, I'm lighting it up. I'm having fun. We're throwing and running. Everything's great. I'm in good shape. Everybody, everybody's good in no pads. You're feeling really good. And then right at the end, Eric goes, all right, let's go a little goal line. Put the ball at the 5. Let's see what we got. I want one offense versus one defense, which you didn't do often, right? Usually it would be against the scout team, the third team. And I said we were running some options, ran a few plays, and I ran an option play, came down, turned it up, and a safety of our team decided he didn't like my right shoulder in the place where it was located by God. And that was the last tackle football play I ever played. Shattered it. And I was, again, I look back at it now, and when I get to talk to kids, in youth settings, which, we all get moments to do that, I tell them that story because I spent some time making bad decisions. The next couple months I was angry. I was like, my team is out there playing and I'm not playing, and we ended up losing in the Orange Bowl to that team with David Humm at quarterback and Johnny Rogers at running back and Rich Glover at nose tackle. We got beat by them, and I didn't even dress for the game. I got to go down to do it. But as I look back all these years later, there were lessons in that, that I've tried to take with me that motivate me to keep doing other things and to live every day to the fullest, and to dream big. And, it stopped that dream for a while, but it didn't stop my life. My God, there were so many people in worse situations than I was. I had to finally realize that God had blessed me in so many ways. And, by the time I graduated, I was ready to rock. It's like, hey, life is really good. I got my degree from Notre Dame. I got 2 monograms for lettering. So, but I look back on and going, that's part of what you have to go through in life, right?
Yeah, there's only a few that end up getting to go on. You mentioned the draft picks and the couple of guys here and there out of the many, and it just keeps getting few. So obviously you're still a little upset. You wish that it were better. We all understand and completely empathize with that. But you get your degree, and then what? What's the next step in Patrick Steenberge's life?
I'll kind of speed through this because there was a number of things, but basically I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to get a job. I didn't know what I was going to do. I actually moved to Fort Collins, Colorado with my teammate, Pat McGraw. And I loved Colorado. Started, playing in the mountains a little bit. I'm out there 3-4 months and I'm pounding nails. I'm building houses. I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do next in life. My dad calls me and said, hey, there's a guy in New York City wants to interview you for a job. I'm like, what are you talking about? And it turns out he had hired another Notre Dame quarterback a couple years ahead of me who had been a backup guy, and done well. So I went to New York for 9 months, kind of in television advertising sales, wearing a suit and a tie. And it was a great job, but I just wasn't ready to do that. I was still 21 years old, and it just wasn't right. So then I moved to Colorado, moved back to Fort Collins, which I had fallen in love with. Worked with a guy, started up an underground FM radio station in Fort Collins, did that for 4 years and loved it, had a great time. And then the thing you were talking about, my parents were in Brazil. I wanted to travel, went down and visited them, decided while I was on that trip, I'm going to learn Spanish. So I figured out how to go to school in Guatemala to study Spanish. Así todavía después de 50 años.
Go ahead, Mr. Patrick.
en español. Puedo platicar.
Go ahead.
Pero entenderme. I speak it fairly well. And so I lived in
With your
Guatemala
bad self.
for a few months and came up with this idea to do what now is called ecotourism. I ended up doing backpacking tours in Guatemala in the late 70s for a number of years. Did that, loved exploring, loved being in the Latin American world back then. And it was a very calm place back in those decades. It's a little different now in the streets of the por la calle of the cities now than what it was. But I loved living there. Ended up coming back to Colorado and got a job with a child care agency working with hardcore delinquent kids who had been court placed. They'd been in jail since they were, a lot of these kids, 13, 14 years old. And then they would go with this group. They'd be ordered by the judge to go there. It was called Vision Quest, based in Arizona. And we taught them how to take on life as young men, a hard work ethic. We were breaking wild horses, Mustangs, which I always wanted to do. We were hiking mountains. We were climbing rock cliffs. I did that for about 5 years until we were pregnant. My wife and I got married. We pregnant with our first child, said, we can't raise a kid in this environment. We need to start our own life. And I moved to Texas to work for the group called the National Cutting Horse Association, which is a great Western style competition of great horses based in Fort Worth. That's what got me to Texas, and did that for 7 years. Met some wonderful people. That's where I met Mel Blount, because he rides cutting horses. That's where I met Jay Novacek, guys like that, Dan Pastorini. But then I just had this urge in me to find a way back into football. I now I'm in my 40s and I'm like, what do I really want to do? I got 3 kids growing up. I can't start coaching at 43 years old and sleep on a couch. And, the grind to get into coaching is tough. It's a young man's start. And I love travel. I had that work with, delinquent kids, with high school kids. I thought about, man, I'd love to work with kids, travel, and do football. And I created this thing called Global Football. And in 1996, I took one high school from Baltimore, Mount St. Joe, to England. And I went, wow, this is kind of cool. We're doing all the things I like and teaching kids to do this as a team. They travel as a team. They go as a team. They make the effort to raise the money to do that. And when we went to China with University of Pennsylvania in 2020, somebody did a little story and realized we had done events and tours and games in 28 countries on 6 continents.
Wow.
And partnered with the NFL for 11 years. I did a Super Bowl event that I took to them, and they're like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to have high school kids play live football in the Super Bowl city. And Paul Tagliabue was the commissioner then. And the guy who supported it, who was working for the NFL in Europe, basically just as like seedling, trying to get things started in Europe, was a young man named Oliver Luck, who you might know. And his sons got pretty famous in the last decade or so.
Virginia, Virginia. Rhodes Scholar.
He supported the idea, did that. I mean, it's amazing. It's what we've been able to do. And sometimes, and I just go to work every day. It's like I come into my little office here behind my house, and like this morning, I'm working on different events with different people. So it keeps rocking.
Well, there's Oliver, and I have to say I can't stand that guy. He beat the tar out of the Colorado State Rams when I was a freshman. We stayed in Pennsylvania. We landed in Pittsburgh and stayed about, I don't know, there's a little racetrack, a dog track, and spent the night there. The following morning, we get up, and our bus driver, we had 2 buses, and they both got lost. They had no idea. 1-lane country road from Pittsburgh to Morgantown. We got there. The game was supposed to start at 1. We got to the stadium at 12:40. They pushed the game back 15 minutes. We had a 5-minute warm-up, and then that guy right there, ladies and gentlemen, boy, the the musketeer, they're the mountain guys, and he kept shooting that doggone musket right behind my head, and I still can't hear very well because they scored all those touchdowns on us, but it worked out very well for Oliver. So I'm glad you got to meet him. What a tremendous athlete he was. And now obviously guys like him and you putting together your passion for the game and figuring out a way to grow it, especially at the ground roots level, at the high school and the kids level, Pop Warner, to where kids can find out how much fun it is, but the life lessons involved. Talk a little bit about how that progressed. I mean, you mentioned that there's countries all over the world, and we'll get to your Tanzania project in a second, but you got to start somewhere. What were some of the tough roads that you had to go through in order to get this started?
Boy, it's always like, how do you convince 30, this is our 30th year right now of doing this. How do I convince guys back then that it would make sense to take their football team to Barcelona, Spain,
right,
to play a game? It's like, what are you talking about? Fortunately, there were some men who did it. Guys like Mike Working was that coach at Mount St. Joe, and he kind of believed in it. Then there was my first college client was John Carroll University, one of the top Division III schools in Cleveland, whose stadium is named the Don Shula Stadium. That first year that they went to Spain and we did an all-star game in Mexico afterwards, they had a linebacker who the coach said, he's pretty good. He's undersized, but he might have a shot to make it, and he was like, yeah, but it's Division III, how many of those guys make it? He said, well, and I watched him in this game in Spain. I went, oh my God, it was London Fletcher.
Yes, sir.
Who had, I think it was 15 years and never missed a game, as I recall. So there were coaches who believed in it. And then there was a great coach in Iowa, in Pella, Iowa, at Central College, which is a Division III school there. His name was Ron Skipper. And he became president of the American Football Coaches Association, AFCA, which is kind of the gathering point for all coaches. Their executive director was a man named Grant Taft, who was a great coach at Baylor for many years. Skip and Grant were buddies. Skip called me and said, hey, I just did an all-star game for Division III. And Division III is all non-scholarship, right? They cannot get money for athletic abilities, and that's still the same rule. Mm-hmm. So they're the kids who love the game in college. They're pure about wanting the game. And he said, we did an all-star game we were involved in, and it was terrible. I had to take down the AstroTurf. They didn't have meals for these guys. There were no officials. He said, can you set up a good all-star game for Division III? And I was like, well, I had just taken John Carroll. That might be a good market, for me. I'm looking for who's going to travel. And I'm not going to get, at that time, I'm not going to get Notre Dame, Texas, Florida State. That was so far beyond what they were thinking. And so I talked to some people I knew in Mexico. Hablo un poco de español otra vez. I could speak the language. And we started a game called the Aztec Bowl, the Tazón Azteca.
Oh, wow.
And we did 20 years of that game, Division III All-Stars against Mexico's All-Star team. Really good matchups. Over the 20 years, it ended up, we won 11, Mexico won 9.
Okay.
We were playing in their home stadium. We'd go down for a week, but it was an awesome experience because we'd take them down my staff would come in on Sunday. They'd come in on we'd go Saturday. They'd come in Sunday. We'd practice Monday to Friday because you had to put a team together. And our own rule was only 2 players from a school. So we divided out into a lot of different schools, part of it from East Coast, from Claremont McKenna and the West Coast out there, and Sewanee in Georgia, and North Central College in Illinois, all those kind of schools. And then we would, within that time, we'd practice 2 days, but then on Friday, we would go do a half day of community service work. We'd go into the real barrios in whatever town we're in. We played in 14 different cities and towns. So we went from Merida, all the way to Aguascalientes, to Torreon, to Tijuana, to Mexico City, to Monterrey. We played in all those different places and just gave these kids incredible experiences. They got to understand Mexico and to learn about it. And that was a great run for 20 years of that. We did that. So that's something I'm really proud of. We did the Super Bowl event I mentioned for 11 years. In the last 5 years, we had 6 teams. We'd bring a team in of kind of U19 high school age. We'd have Japan, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Europe, and then a USA team. What I wanted to do with the USA team at that point, they were playing good football in Canada, obviously, and in Mexico. The rest of the world was kind of not playing much. They were getting it. Japan was playing in schools a little bit. But I said, we need to make this competitive. There's no need for us to go win 80-0, right? That doesn't prove a point. So we basically, like when it was in Houston, we did a Harris County all-star team. So it was just seniors from that county where the Super Bowl was. And at the time, we had a grade point average. So you had to have a 3.0 to play on Team USA, just to level the field a little bit. After about 5 years, when we found out how good Canada was, Coach Ed Burkett from Torrey Pine says, Patrick, we'd be okay with a 2.5 maybe, not instead of that 3.0. I need a little more speed,
Yeah.
But we did that for 11 years. I worked with Pop Warner for, I think it was a dozen years, where we brought international teams in to be part of their Super Bowl. We've done a lot of things that we've kept doing and restarted. But most of the time now I work with individual schools, be they high schools, Division III colleges. I've taken University of Pennsylvania has gone twice with me. So I've taken some Ivy League teams, Johns Hopkins. We've done NAIA schools like Siena Heights has gone a number of times. And some of the really good D3 colleges like North Central has gone 7 times in 20 years. They're allowed to go every 3 years. They go every 3 years. And the coach is real proud of the fact they've now won 3 out of the last 5 national championships. And a big part of it is the team building they build when they're going to Italy, when they're going to Ireland, when they're going to Spain. A lot of those things. And the big event now that's going on annually now, you may have noticed the NCAA opens their Division I seasons now in Dublin, Ireland.
Yes, sir.
That started in 2012, and Notre Dame Navy went. John Anthony, who is my travel partner, he's a much bigger partner than I am, but they own that college game now. Last year it was Florida State and Georgia Tech.
Yep.
Georgia Tech beat them. People didn't know. They got a hint there that Florida State might not have been as good as they traditionally are. I'm sure they're coming back. This coming year is going to be Iowa State and Kansas State. So I take high schools to be part of the whole NCAA kickoff. We get some pub on ESPN for the game. The kids get to play, in a really sweet stadium in Dublin and be part of the whole thing. There's a club team in England called the NFL Academy UK now, where the NFL is identifying and training top athletes out of Europe, and they've started to do some combines in Africa now. So that's kind of my big event that I keep doing, along with, I'm getting ready to take IMG Academy, their varsity team. We're going to go to Japan in March. Muhlenberg's going with me to Bavaria and Austria. Hamden Sydney out of Virginia is going to go. Where are we going with them? We're going to Italy. Yeah, we want to go to Italy. And then I'm doing our first trip ever to Portugal. We're going to finally get to the 29th country.
Wow.
And we're taking Wheaton College, a really good school, very Christian-based out of Chicago. And we're going to build in 4 days of community service work along with their football and touring in Portugal. So when I go back for my reunions at Notre Dame, and there was just a big one last year for the 50th anniversary of winning the national championship in '73. And all my buddies were like, why are you still working? Because most of them were smarter than me and got really good jobs. And, there were a few of them, like one of my good buddies is the Ghost, Dave Casper. And he's like, Steenberge, what are you doing? Why are you working? I went, well, I can't stop. I'm dealing with really good men, the coaches who want to do this, their athletic directors, their heads of schools. They believe in the full education of young men. They all want to win football games. Every coach wants to win, and for good reason. But we think, and it's been proven, that they get to be better teams this way, and they get to be better young men.
Yeah. Hey, Patrick, real quick, talk about everything that's involved. I would imagine if you go to Ireland, and thank you, you brought my high school, Notre Dame High School out of Sherman Oaks, California, to one of the Ireland games. When you first go there, hey, we're thinking of putting this. How many no's do you hear before finally somebody says, well, I think we might be able to do it, but you need buses, you need transportation, you need food, you've got to get places for these teams to stay, for them to practice, you got to get the fields lined correctly. There's 1,000 things that you're responsible for. Give me an idea of just how busy you are, but more than that, just when you first begin and you go to a place like Portugal, what's it like, and how do you get through to where everybody around goes, yep, I guess we can do this, and we're going to, and you be able to proceed from there?
Actually, Portugal's a good example because there's never been an American football team play in Portugal.
It's not their sport.
Yeah. So we're taking the first team over, Wheaton College out of Chicago, and they're going to be the first American football team to play in the country of Portugal. And that excites me. We just had a Zoom call yesterday with their head coach, their assistant coach who does the operations. They do a lot of, like, say, community service around the world. And how I connected with Portugal, I go to every year to this AFCA convention where there's 10,000 coaches, right? Big, loud men, all bro hugging, and talking stories. And I met this guy. I have a global football booth there. And a guy stopped by about 4 years ago and he said, hey, I'm coaching football in Portugal. I'm just getting started. I speak good English. Can you help us with some equipment? Could you help? Maybe someday we'll be able to host a team. And basically, I've worked with him over the years to help get teams and schools to donate equipment, especially used stuff that they're going to recondition. Or I think in helmets, you can only wear them 5 years now and you got to put them on the rack. Well, they don't care in other countries. They just need something,
Yep.
So I got to work with him over the last few years. And then last year he says, we've formed our own federation, the American Football Federation of Portugal. I'm president of that because I'm the only guy crazy enough to work at it. And can you do a game? And I went, let me ask. And I started talking to my coaches, and the coach, Jesse Scott at Wheaton, says, I love that idea. So basically it's like, okay, I got to find somebody who will play. And I asked them to set up, basically they provide the field, they get the officials, they get the water. I set a list of, here's all the things we need. They've got sticks and chains, at least one set in Portugal, Now other countries, Germany, England, Spain, those are vibrant now. Associations, federations, leagues. Austria, they're just like operating with a high school or a college league in America now. They've got all that stuff. They know what they're doing, but it's changed. And the Portugal experience now this week takes me back to where it was 25, 30 years ago in a lot of these countries. And I do work closely with the Anthony Travel Group. And they handle, like I say, they book the flights for us. I never wanted to be a travel agent. So they book the flights. We cooperate on where they're going to stay. And I've got a guy in England who does my operations throughout Europe, and he'll find the hotels, the meals. He knows what we've talked about, the quality. What I do is build the experience. I get guys who want to hike mountains and we're going to go hike a mountain in Switzerland on one of our days, or you want to go whitewater rafting? Yeah, let's go do that. You want to go work in an orphanage? Yes, we'll do that. So I work with the schools to figure out what do they want out of the trip. Here's what we can build. And it's, it just got to keep going. I've got a pretty good checklist now of what we need. And I work with visionary coaches and curious student athletes.
Well, you also work with a guy named Chris Creighton. Tell the story about Chris and how that has also changed your world in so many different ways.
Boy. And people ask me, or I tell people about Chris. I don't wait for them to ask. He's the best man in college football that I know. I'm sure there's a lot of really good ones. In fact, I think our coach at Notre Dame is right there with him from everything I've seen and learned. And I've talked to him once or twice. Yeah. But Chris is just an amazing guy. Played NAIA, started coaching in NAIA in the Midwest. Went to Wabash College, an all-boys Division III college. That's where we first met. And he wanted to go to Europe. So we set it all up. And he said, I want to hike some mountains while we're there. Can you do that? I went, yeah, we're in the Alps, And so we set set a thing. I'll never forget this day. We're having breakfast, and it's kind of light snow out there. We're like at a ski resort, and most of these trips happen in May, right when school gets out. That's for most of the schools to travel, May or June. And Chris is he's got his hiking boots, his high wool socks, his shorts. He's kind of looking like a guide. And he's got his, fleece shirt on. And his guys are walking around in tennis shoes and different things. We go out to meet the guides that I had hired to take us up the mountain. And Chris is like, I want to go to that mountain. And they're like, Coach, that's a great idea, but we've only got like 8 hours of daylight, and that's going to take you longer. And he goes, well, we need something steep, and we're going back and forth on the map, and the kids are just sauntering around, and I'm looking around. These kids look like college kids on vacation. They got shorts, flip-flops, a T-shirt, maybe a sweatshirt, a hoodie over top. They don't look like –
span is how long, Patrick?
Yeah, about this long, yeah. And they don't look like mountaineers.
No.
And we're kind of getting into a heated discussion because Chris wants to go higher, steeper, and the guides are like, we are licensed guides here. We cannot take, we've got to, and he goes, what kind of footwear? And Chris goes to it. Hey guys, you got hiking boots, right? And the guy goes, no, I got Tevas. And the other guys, I got sneakers. Anyway, we ended up hiking a smaller mountain, had a great experience. 3 years later, he's still at Wabash. We go to Panama and we build in 3 days of working to build a subsistence farm on the hillside in the rainforest of Panama. And the highlight was we moved this rock, which was, I don't know, 1,000 pounds or something, just this massive rock that we dug on for 3 days. And, you dig a rock, it gets bigger as you go down. And finally, the whole O-line used their Joe Moore lessons, and they pushed this rock and it tumbled down a hill. And we built a tilapia pond where they could have catfish growing and be a subsistence protein food. I got to know him then. He takes a job at Drake University in Iowa. It was 1AA non-scholarship. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like Division III on steroids from an athletic standpoint. And I see Chris at the convention, and he comes up to me. We do the bro hug thing, and he goes, hey, I got something big. I need your help. I'm like, yeah, sure. What do you want to do? And I knew it was time where he goes, look, I want to go to Africa. There's never been a game in Africa. I said, what do you mean? He says, there's never been a real football game, not a college game, not a high school game, maybe a military pickup thing, but there's never been a game on the continent.
On the continent, yeah, I'm talking, Patrick, you're in not just a country, you're talking about anywhere in the entire continent. How big an idea is this? Are you kidding me?
That is Coach Creighton. That's where his mind goes. And I'm like, okay, and figure out there's a couple thousand men walking around. There's all this din, you've been around conventions, right, of any sort. And we're standing in the middle on this aisle and guys are going by. And I said, okay. I said, that's kind of cool. You want to play a game? I said, all right. I said, where? And he goes, Tanzania. I was like, all right, cool. And I said, what? And I'm like, but why do you want to do this? And he goes, I want to show my kids think they're poor Iowa dirt farmers. I want to show them real poverty. I want to go work in orphanages. I want to help them build a schoolhouse. I want to help them with housing. I want to spend days. We know they're underserved people in Tanzania, Africa. I want to help. I want my guys to do this. And I'm like, he's got my attention now. I said, all right, cool. And I'm like, so what role do you want me to do? And he goes, everything. He goes, I've got my athletic director is pretty cool. It's a lady who really liked the idea, and our president's bought into it. He wants to go, and he goes, so I need you to set up everything. I'm like, so who are you going to play? He goes, I don't know. That's why I want you.
Yeah, everything. Everything is everything.
I went, oh my gosh, and I went, and now he changes into his, and you would know this, Vincent, when a coach is recruiting, his eyes change, right?
Yeah.
his whole facade. And all of a sudden he goes, no, I need to know. He goes, I'm giving you something that's going to change your life, and we're going to change hundreds of lives. But absolutely. I need a commitment. Are you in? I said, when do you want to do it? He goes, I don't know. You figure all that stuff out. I got my team. I got my school. And I went, let's do it. And we shook hands and hugged. 17 months later, we're standing on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,325 feet, with 122 people, most of them college athletes from Iowa, and Mexico.
Wow.
And we're standing on top of there. We set a record at the time for the most people on the top of Kilimanjaro at the same time as the culmination of a 16-day trip. And it just like, and Chris and I, obviously we were bonded for life with that. There were so many ways it shouldn't have worked. There were so many things, when you plan it could have gone wrong. We ended up taking 198 on the whole trip that started the tour with us. The toughest part in the beginning was finding an opponent, because the NCAA rule is if you play an out of season game, you can't just go play somebody else in America on an out of season. You have to play a foreign team on foreign soil. So finding a foreign team, and I had friends in Germany who I asked, and England who I asked, Japan who I asked, Australia. I went around the world with people I knew, and they all kind of went, well, that's a neat idea. Who's going to pay for it? Why would you do it? Do they play football? Do they have fields? What's the food? They had all these reasons why not. And about 6 months later, I'm still, and Mexico was my first choice. And the head coach down there, Frank Gonzalez, who's retired now a few years ago, was an icon. He would be like what Nick Saban has been here the last decade. He was winning championships. And I talked to Frank, and he thought it was a pretty cool idea. He saw the vision of it. He said, give me a week. And I called him back in a week. I'm all excited. And he said, I just can't get over the fact that I don't know how we'd return from that. I know it's going to be in May. We don't play till August, but we open up with and how are we going to play? And I'm like, doesn't matter how you're going to play. This is bigger than that, but he couldn't get himself to do it. So all of a sudden, Sandy Clubb, who is their AD, just dynamic lady who has a great now consulting company based in Arizona. And she calls me and says, Patrick, the kids come back to camp, in like 10 days. We need an answer, because if we're going to do this, we need to raise a lot of money. We need to get a lot of things going. I need to get support from alumni. We got to set a deadline on this opponent. And I said, well, how long can you go? And she goes like, I don't know, the 10th of August. I said, all right. And I'm like sitting at home and I'd already been there twice. I'd gone twice to scout things out, to learn things, to find a stadium. All that stuff is in the book there about how that all worked. But wait, I got this other guy in Mexico who's head of student affairs, Enrique Ramos. And I call Enrique or email him, then he calls and he said, look, I'm going to be in Texas next week. Can we sit down? He comes up, we sit down for like 3 hours. I explain the whole thing to him. And again, I'm not worried about the nuts and bolts. I want the vision of this. And he said, God, that's a great idea. He said, I'm in. I'll figure it out. It may be an all-star team from different schools. I don't know how, and I did the same thing that Chris had done to me. I said, no, are you in? Because if you are, then we move on. If you're not, I got to keep looking. And he and I hugged, and we talked, again, this morning, he's the guy who brought Mike McCoy down to Mexico this week to speak to high school kids, and he said that, and that's kind of when it all started. And in May of 2011, we did all those things. We played a great football game, came down to the last series. Drake was able to hang on and beat Team Mexico Conadepe. We did 2 days of practices. There was a rugby field that had 2 fields on it set up for like rugby field. So I had the Mexico team on one field, Drake on the other. They smuggled in 1,000 footballs, just rubber youth-sized footballs, so we could do clinics with youth kids. So we had 2 days of clinics, 500 each day. And I worked through a private school system who brought kids out on buses from Arusha, Tanzania. We did these clinics, and they all wanted to keep the football. And I said, you come to the game on Saturday. It's no charge. We'll give you a football and one of these really cool T-shirts with the logo of the 3 countries and a football. Because otherwise, if we gave them footballs, we'd never see them again, right? Yeah. The kids would be like, yeah, right. Yeah. And they all showed up for the game the next day, played this game. We had 11,000, almost 12,000 people come. Loved the game. They had no idea what was going on. The thing they liked the most was the punting game, because that high spiral, right? Ooh, you could hear it. yeah, talk about preparation of that. I mean, building the goalposts, all of that kind of stuff. And then we did, after the game, then we went to a smaller town, did 3 days of community service work organized by the IRIS group. It's called Iowa Resource for International Service. We built homes, a couple of homes for kids, for families. We totally revamped a hospital. We worked in orphanages with kids. We did that. And then we hiked Kilimanjaro. Everybody who wanted to started. It was 4.5 days up, 1.5 days down. It's not incredibly, it's not technical. You don't have to rope up or carabiners. It's just a long, tough hike at high altitude that gets to people. But we had 100, and I think the numbers were, we started with 126 and 119 made it to the summit. Some of them had altitude issues, when you get up around 18, 19,000. Changed my life, changed a lot of people's lives. And I am working hard every night to do it again. I've got some plans in the midst that I'm working on, and hopefully I can reach the right people who will support another similar. I want to do a reunion with all the guys. It'll be 15 years reunion next year in 26. These guys have stories, and I've heard them. Chris has heard them. The Mexico guys have heard them, how that event changed their life. They did something special that changed their life, bonded them forever. And then it also, they were able to change the lives of the people of Arusha and Moshi, Tanzania, because of the things we were able to do. They got to meet Americans, as just guys, and we got to meet them just as young men and young women and people of, didn't matter if they were African, South American, whatever, they're just other human beings. So it was, I'm dying to go back and do it again. And this time I want to do a documentary film on the whole thing and talk about what we did then and how it relates now. And now to where, there are African, native Africans playing now in the NFL. There are kids that have opportunities now to see what's going on. So anyway, sorry, I get passionate about that. Sorry, I went on for so long, but
absolutely. Well, the thing that has always fascinated me about how much bigger it is, not just the game. Yes, we can say that the game is growing and it's in Portugal in ways that it never was before. And now you're talking about Tanzania, which has never been played on that continent before, at least not in a competitive, real game.
Right.
But your cultural, your custom, your historical, your environmental differences that kids from Iowa learn stuff. Kids from Tanzania learn stuff. The Mexican kids, you know what I'm saying? They're all gaining some knowledge about something they'd never been exposed to before. And your week on Kilimanjaro, just things that are absolutely fascinating, all because of your ability to get a pigskin and a field together. The results of that are amazing.
It is and I think we all believe there's no other sport like it. It's for all the reasons you mentioned and so much more. There's no other team game where 11 guys have 11 different jobs to do for 3 seconds. And there's 11 guys on the other side who have jobs to do to stop you from succeeding with those 3 or 4 seconds. And you have a plan that you make in your huddle, but the moment the ball snaps, all hell breaks loose. It doesn't. You have to adjust with poise, as Arrow would tell us. There's no other sport, and there's no other sport where you rely on the guy to your left, to your right, behind you, because 10 guys can't do it. The plays don't work if 10 guys do it, or you don't stop the other play. And that's so football and all the pieces. What I try to do is bring all the other aspects. Let the coaches coach the game. They know that game. All I want to do is give them experiences for their kids, for them. Parents who want to come, it's just it's awesome that we're working. I just, like I say, just talked to Portugal this morning. Last night I talked to my guide in Tanzania. I said, "Hey, we're looking at 26. I need to start setting some things up." And he told me that there is a new mayor in that Arusha region, and he's real promotional oriented. Wants to bring more tourists to Arusha. I said, "I got away." So. Yeah. I mean, it's great what you guys do by allowing me and other people to tell their stories. I thought this would be a 20-minute conversation. I really appreciate you giving me time to ramble on.
Well, I think the neat thing about growth and development for any young man or woman, and girls, let's be candid, we're three guys here. Logan is our fourth. We're not very smart. We know it. We can tease about it.
Right.
Girls mature a lot earlier than men do for a number of different reasons. But the average guy, when he's about 18 to maybe 23, somewhere in that range, you start realizing the world's a much bigger place than what I realize. And for the exposure that you're granting to people and have been doing now for years, whether it be in Ireland, whether it be in Japan, you're going to go there for the first, you're going to go to Portugal. Japan is a little more familiar with it, but just to offer these experiences to kids and the people that are receiving our kids and saying, this is an amazing group of young men that are playing a game, and they're going to help build a school. Are you kidding me? They're going to go to our orphanage and they're going to go help in other ways and affect our community. It's a plus win-win all the time.
It's again, I mean, nobody else I know at my age is having so much fun. There's people who made a lot more money. There's people that have got a lot more stuff, but our house is paid for. I got 3 kids with wonderful spouses, 6 grandkids. I mean, what else do I want in life? I just want to keep doing it.
Yeah. Why stop? You're affecting the world in so many different ways. Vincent, any final questions from you? I've dominated this conversation. I apologize.
No problem, Mr. LaBelle. It's been a lot of great guests that came on our platform of 100 Yards of Football. And I can say today I learned something different every day. I'll be 65 years old in July. But I can tell you this. If I had to say a top 3 guests, Mr. Patrick goes to the list.
Wow.
And one thing I like about your story, Mr. Patrick, you're impacting young people at a real critical time that they need help.
Yep.
And you making changes in life. And then with your story, big time school, things didn't work out. You took some time to find out what you want to do. You could have been selfish like a lot of people do when they go through hardship. I don't care about nobody. But you found the way and still got that good God spirit in you. It's something special about you, man, that I really appreciate. Something special about Mr. Harper LaBelle from bringing you on. And God don't make no mistake. I attended the University of Arkansas from 78 to 82. In 1980, I tried to walk on. I was cut after the spring, but the head coach was Lou Holtz. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
And when he got the Notre Dame job, I'm saying, is this guy? Because he was a quiet guy at Arkansas.
Right.
I said, is this little fiery guy? And then to have a guy that played in 1971, maybe one of the greatest college football seasons ever, to be a starting quarterback. That's what I'm saying. Respect on your name. God don't make no mistakes. And I've been very blessed today to hear your story. Man, it's been exciting. And it's going to make my life go a lot better for the rest of the week and the rest of my life. This is what sports is about to me. It's the stories. I learned something from my parents. I always respect your elders because they're going to take you to where you need to go when you get old. Thank you for coming on today on 100 Yards of Football. Thank you.
Oh, it's an honor. So was that a backhanded comment? What, your elders? I'm only 6 or 7 years older than you, man. That didn't qualify you as an elder.
No, you're a good looking guy though.
If you got gray hair, you
got blonde hair. No, like that, you're still a good looking guy.
I'm trying. When you mentioned Lou, I didn't dive into that one. 2009, a guy in Japan who I know really well, played at the highest level in NFL Europe. He says, "Hey, can you get Notre Dame to play in Japan again?" Which they played in '87. I went, it's going to cost you a lot of money. It's da-da-da. I said, here's an idea. How about we get a Notre Dame alumni team of former players to go? He said, if you can do that, if you can get a big name to coach it, Mr. Lou Holtz coached the Notre Dame Legends team in Japan, in the Tokyo Dome, live TV in 2009. And the wide receiver coach who Coach Holtz was trying to get on the field during the week, but said, no, sir, was Tim Brown. was the
Oh my
wide
God.
receiver coach.
Yeah.
But Lou is
Yeah,
amazing.
Heisman Trophy.
Coach
Lou had
Holtz
one
is
of the
amazing.
great lines of all time. Now, this was not at Notre Dame, but when he went to South Carolina, he said, "Coach, what do you think? What do you think about your team and all that?" And he goes, "I'm going to tell you right now. I feel like this is like coaching Noah's Ark. I don't have two of anything out there." It was so stupid, but yet so hilariously funny because it's just being candid. I don't have any depth here. I don't have what I had at Notre Dame, but that's Lou for you. All right, Patrick. One thing I want to do, tell me a little bit about writing this book and how it would benefit somebody's life. I've just started. I've read some of it, not the whole thing. And then I also want you to discuss how people can get in touch with you. There may be one of our listeners out there or someone who can share with somebody else. Hey, I know somebody who knows somebody, and connecting the dots for you. It's about building relationships and making the game a better one. But globalfootball.com is not only the website, but I want other ways that people can get in touch with you.
All right. It's anybody who's sat through about an hour and a half of this, they deserve something. I should send them a book just for listening to us, But yeah, the book, when I had AP English at Erie Cathedral Prep, so I can write okay. It's not a masterpiece, but on the flight back from Tanzania after that whole thing, they were like, wow, and Coach Creighton said it best. He goes, there were a million reasons why this should not have worked.
Yeah.
But he said, we had God's hand over us the whole time. And we both believe in that truly. But on the way back on the flight, I'm like, I'm going to forget all this stuff, right? I mean, I've got notes. I got lots. I keep lots of little notebooks. I said, I better write this stuff down. And then for the next 9 months, every night when my wife would go to bed, I'd go to my office and start writing. So I basically, it's just an analog of what happened, how it's got the Chris Creighton story, a forward by him, a forward by Sandy, a forward by Enrique. It tells the story of how it came about, how we got together, different steps, talks about the game. In the football has, talks about hiking the mountain, talks about all that. It's just kind of the story of that. And it's chapters that you can read a chapter very easily. Tupande Kilelene. When I was going over there the 2 times before, the second time I'm with my guide, Frank Mella, who is the best. If anybody needs a mountain guide in Tanzania, safari guide, he's your man. And I said, Frank, I need a motto, a slogan, right? We were all in football, right? You had coaches always have a motto for this season or this spring or whatever. I said, what's it mean to make a plan to get to the top of that mountain? What's it mean to set a goal, to win all your games this year? What's it mean to, just set heights, set goals? And he said, well, and Swahili is the language of East Africa.
Yeah.
And he said, well, it really is Kileleni, Kileleni, which is pronounced just like Spanish. So I can pronounce Swahili without knowing but Kileleni means to the summit. And I went, oh, that's cool. That's what we're doing. We're going to the summit, not just to the mountain summit, but every day of our lives, we try to go to the summit.
Exactly.
And then I said, but we do it as a team. How does that work? And he goes, Tupande means all together. Okay. So it's like a team. So I went, okay, that's the name, Tupande Kilelene, which means let's climb to the summit together. So that's the name of the book that we coined. And the Kilelene part, over the last few years, my son is in the military. He got involved in his work there, and he started doing challenge coins. And he started giving me, which some of you may know, for their troop, for their division, for their mission they were on. And challenge coins are pretty cool, where it's got their name on them, and it's a coin that you can have and trade. And so I started making coins for Global Football with the Kilelene logo, and it's just a very simple little coin, and it's got the outline of the mountain there with a star on the top that says Kilelene. And then on the backside, I've got my logo, my Global Football logo, with the thing that says Kilelene to the summit. And this is kind of my enhanced business card. When I meet people, there you go. There you go. You got one, Harper. When I meet people or I get to know them, it's kind of like after I leave, I'll send them a coin or I'll give them one there. If I feel it's somebody who's got some passion in life, people, and we do run into some people who are just going through life. They don't get a Kilelene coin, but I keep this with me. I just pulled it out of my pocket. I put it on my nightstand when I go to bed. In the morning, I get up because, as we all know, as you get to different ages, there's some mornings I just don't want to get up. And I get up and I go to the gym and I do a little half-hour workout. Then I go swim, a mile or so. But I put this in my pocket every morning and go, all right, Kileleni, buddy, let's go. And it's kind of, that's my jump start. The book itself, it's available. I self-published it. It's Ex Libris is the publisher. Or I sell them myself. People just send me $20 and I'll send it to you. I probably should do a better marketing job of getting it out there. But I use it kind of as an enhanced business card for people. But if you can go on Amazon, if you can remember that title, Tupande Kileleni, they'll sell it. Or I relate phone and email, patrick@globalfootball.com. It's real simple. Don't try to spell my last name, just patrick@globalfootball.com. I use Instagram a fair amount now because it works for pictures and stuff, and that's just @globalfootballguy. So @globalfootballguy is my Instagram. And then I guess if the phone, and I'm happy to put it out there, it's it's nice that we can keep our phones now when we move, right? I've had this for 40 years maybe. 817, which is Texas. What's my number? 817-219-7274. 817-219-7274. And that, what you mentioned there, the toughest part for every school, and it really hurts me because I see guys all the time, coaches, athletic directors, who want this to happen for their kids. Airlines aren't cheap. They aren't free. Nope. Hotels are not free.
Nope.
Schools have to raise the money. Now, I've seen some schools that when I first go visit, I'm like, ooh, how are they going to do it? There's been leadership at the school among parents, among administrators that say, no, we need to do this for our kids. And every year I run into a couple of those guys that do it and find ways to do it. I met a guy in Ireland last year. I had Bonner and Prendy School, which is it used to be a boys and girls Catholic school. Now they've combined in the suburbs of Philadelphia, basic middle class, school. They were over there and they were getting ready to play against the NFL Academy of the UK. And all of a sudden a guy, an elderly man, not elderly, but a mature man who turns out was my age, came walking up just to say something to the kids after practice. And I'm like, all right, this guy must be somehow connected with the team or everything. And he just addressed the kids. And I talked to him afterwards and I look over and he had a Mount Kilimanjaro hat on. I'm like, hey, and I started talking. I introduced myself. He says, well, I was an alumnus here from 1969. I helped in some way to get some of these kids here that needed some additional funding. I've been, had a very fortunate life in my business, so I'm happy to help some kids. And I said, where'd you get that T-shirt or that hat? And he goes, oh man, he goes, 2 months ago, I hiked Mount Kilimanjaro. And he went on to the story. And I went, well, I'll tell you my brief story. So we became dear friends. There's people like that all around America, but somebody's got to reach out to them. Somebody's got to set the stage. We're doing a lot better with our website now, the globalfootball.com. I've got a young man who's building that. Now there's a 30-year story that kind of has a highlight of what we've done. So, I mean, we could treat people really well if they want to help out and get some young men and their coaches and all that to travel with us. That's always a dream come true when that happens.
From idea to getting on an actual airplane, this is not a overnight process. What's the normal time span? Is this going to be a year and a half? From a coach or an athletic director at a high school or a college to where they're actually, on the field playing?
Traditionally, a year to 15 months or so, I would say. I go to the coaches convention every January, have a little booth, and that's where I meet Chris Creighton and guys who have traveled, and
Absolutely.
We've got testimonials. So I meet them in January. Most of them travel the next May, June, or August to Ireland. So it's kind of there. Now I've got 2 schools in Pennsylvania I'm going to visit and that are both really interested in going this August to Ireland. We've talked for a couple of months. I've sent them documents. I'm going to meet them personally because I want to meet everybody that travels with us as a school. Hopefully by the time people see this, they'll be already ready to rock, and that's 9 months away.
Okay.
From our end, we can put it together. It's really their end to get everything, and kids got to get passports, some of the stuff, but we can make it pretty easy for them, but they got to take the effort. But there's nothing like getting on. I love it when they get off the plane in some foreign country, and I get on the bus in the front, and I've got a football team. Say there's 45 players and 5 coaches, and then there's a second bus with the parents and the athletic trainers and the supporters. And I get on, and these guys are like, they like didn't sleep on the plane. They're tired. They're looking around. Where are we? And I'll go up and I'm looking. Half of them are on their phones, right? They're already on their phone talking. And I'll go, hey, everybody got one of these? And I'll hold up my phone. They went, oh yeah. I went, put it in your pocket. You're not learning anything today in your phone. And they're like, what? I mean, I bark out at them like I'm a coach, and that gets their attention. I said, no, take pictures. But when you're walking around today, don't look at your phone. You're going to have guides teach you things. You're going to see things you've never seen. Yeah. You're going to smell things, taste things. I said, then tonight, send pictures home to your mom and dad, then your girlfriend, in that order, please. Yeah. Anyway, it's pretty special what these kids get to do. So.
Yeah, well, the journey itself and then the experiences afterwards. And I guess with your website, one thing you'll probably be doing in the future is reuniting and hearing people's stories. And then, I went to and then some kid at the orphanage getting to say, yeah, somebody visited me and what a difference that made. Now I own my own business or something like that. Just the way that lives are being touched independently from one another. And you're a part of that. So thank you so much for your dedication, your devotion, and for obvious reasons, your passion for the game itself to grow, and for the people that are a part of the game to grow in ways they never thought they could otherwise.
Well, it's really special you guys have given me this much. I do a lot of 5-minute interviews, 8-minute little discussions. This has really been fun to tell this story and, to learn from you guys. You guys, when I found out, Harper, when we first talked, that you went to school at CSU in Fort Collins, I went, oh, the fun fort. I saw the Rolling Stones there in 1975.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then Vincent, to hear your story and your memories of 1971 and Arkansas. Houston Nutt's become a dear friend, by the way.
Oh, okay.
If you know
Coach Central, by way of Oklahoma State. A lot of people don't know he was an excellent basketball player. He went to Oklahoma State as a point guard. Then he played quarterback and got into football. But that's nice. Pig suey, baby.
Oh, I was gonna say, Patrick, don't get him going pig suey yet. We gotta wait a little while.
Pig suey, baby.
Can't wait. You gotta have it.
All right, Kilelene, my man, to the summit every day.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of this special show as well. Our guest, Patrick Steenberge, who played quarterback at Notre Dame and had great experiences in Fort Collins, Colorado, which I know a little bit about, and obviously has had an impact on the globe, really. And he is the president, CEO, the creator of globalfootball.com. Please visit that website. Go to it, find out a little bit more. And if you'd like to contribute to be able to pitch in for some of these organizations that have these trips and the expenses that are a part of it, and that's something that you feel led to do, then by all means, that would be a great place to start. But we appreciate Patrick and his precious time here today for telling his story and giving us an insight not only on him, but his experiences in life. Thank you so much, Patrick. So for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, and for Vincent Turner, who's filling in today for Stephen Travers, Vincent obviously is not only the co-host here, but the founder of 100 Yards of Football. I'm Harper Lavelle saying thank you, everybody, for tuning in today on a special edition of 100 Yards of Football. We appreciate you being a part of the show. Have a fantastic rest of your day.